So, today I've come to Morton Hampstead to come and meet Lisa. Hello, Lisa Schneidau.
Hello, Chris Holland.
I've come to see Lisa Schneidau, and she is an ecologist. She works with the wildlife trusts here in Devon, and she's the author of this wonderful book, Botanical Folk Tales. And so I've come to talk to her about storytelling. Hi, Lisa.
Hello, welcome to Morton.
Thank you very much. How did you get into storytelling, Lisa?
How did I get into storytelling? Gosh, I've been telling for probably about 12 or 13 years now, and I went along to different storytellings for quite a while. I used to live in Edinburgh, and there was a great little pub just off the Royal Mile. It was the kind of place where you went upstairs and there was paper peeling off the walls and the ceilings, and everybody would turn up once a month and just put their names in a hat, and whoever's name came out of a hat, they would tell a story. And there were people from all walks of life. There were little folk tales, there were real life stories, and I was just hooked. And it kind of went from there. I didn't really try storytelling myself until I came back down to England and down to the southwest, and I went along to a weekend that was being held on Dartmoor by a storyteller called Martin Shaw. And he told a big, beardy myth that took all weekend. And I just thought, I want to have a go at this. I want to try this. And it went from there, really.
So how do stories help us give a new perspective on nature?
I think that there is something about nature and the wild, which is a very magical thing, which, I mean, I'm speaking as a conservationist. I trained as a scientist, and that kind of stuff is beaten out of us. You know, everything needs to be factual and justifiable and physical, and that doesn't really bring in those aspects of magic that have really sparked our imaginations when we were little, does it? So story is a way of accessing that. It's a way of playing with that. If you are told a story that really grabs you, and 3 days later you're doing the washing up and you kind of go back to that story in your head, and an image will come up, and why is that playing with my mind? What is there about that story? And the curiosity is off, you know, you're there. So about nature, that to me is a very, very interesting thing, because all of these living things around us, they are other, aren't they? You know, they are so different to humans, and we might use them, we might eat them, we might turn them into furniture, we might whatever, but there is a certain awe about nature that is very difficult to put into words, but I think that's very strong in all of us if we stop and listen and if we observe. So if those stories provoke that, I think that's great. More of that.
I'm with you on that one. I consider myself a wowist rather than a
wowist?
Yes, rather than a Taoist or anything like that.
Oh, I like that. That's
because
good.
I really do love to wonder about things, and you know, one of the things that sparks my curiosity is the newness in nature, and that's one of the things that also appealed to me in your book, actually, about the stories that you've chosen in it, is that it helps me have a new perspective on some of the plants there. So why did you choose these particular stories?
Do you know, for every one of those stories there's 4 or 5 others I could have chosen, but I liked the stories that were in the book. I wanted to put stories in that I liked, but there's such a variety of things in there. I think as storytellers, we probably all have this idea that there is some little ancient nugget of wisdom somewhere in some traditional story we haven't yet found that is, it's there, you know, we'll find it eventually. And actually a lot of these stories are telling stories about the ordinary, but they are seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. There are little twists going on there that just bring you up short sometimes. You just think, oh, wasn't expecting that. And there's quite a lot of that in there. There's some downright silly stories in there as well. Silly is very important.
And I really like the fact that there's a lot of stories in here which are quite short, and so for somebody like myself who likes telling shorter stories, and for outdoor educators, teachers in general, it's quite accessible for us to be able to pick a story and tell it again quite quickly.
That's one of the reasons the book's there. I would really love it if people could take these stories and tell them. Just have a go at telling those stories. Even if you've not really done storytelling before, just give it a go, because the storytelling tradition, as you know, it's an oral tradition.
Yeah.
It is all about sharing and passing those stories on, and then the person who hears them passes it on, and the stories change and develop and grow, and that's what it's all about.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Lisa. Good. Well, I do have a look at the book. It is a most wonderful little book, and find a story and tell it. There is your challenge.
Enjoy. Really, the way that I started practicing storytelling, and I would encourage anyone who wants to get into storytelling to do this, is to actually go along to story groups. And there's story groups all over the country now that are held in pubs or different places where you can just turn up and try your hand at storytelling, because it's one of those things that you will only improve if you get the practice, and you will only practice if you can actually tell a story to somebody.
Yeah.
It's much more than reading it or reading it out. You actually have to get to know a story, make it your own, and then find the confidence to, the thing, to actually tell it and practice it and change it, and then you'll be on your way.
Yeah. Yeah, I know for me it took years to enable me to have the confidence to tell stories, and some of them were personal, some of them were sort of nature tales or fables, and the personal tales are often some of the hardest to tell, aren't they?
They are.
But there's magic in them all.
There's magic everywhere. I mean, the thing about storytelling, I do a lot of presentations at work. So I've worked for wildlife trusts all over the country, and when you're talking about facts or information, that's easier. If you're talking about things that emotionally mean something to you, things you connect with, which has to happen through a story, you have to connect emotionally to the story you're telling, that's much more of a challenge. And sometimes if there's a particular story that I'm feeling very emotional about, you can feel the tears welling up. You're thinking, no, stop. That doesn't really enhance the story. But it is much more challenging. It's like you're putting yourself out there, but you need to do that with story.
Yeah, you do. And that has reminded me of a time when I saw a guy called Jonathan Kay as a fool doing a story about his visit to the Middle East, and he would literally just walked into the room pretending to be an old woman who had lost her family, and to this day I get a feeling of the sadness and the grief that he was carrying with him because he connected to that story that he was sharing. And so I think that stories are, as you say, it's really important to connect to your own emotions that come up within the story.
I love, there's a little adage I was told a long time ago that there's 3 parts to a story. There's the story itself, and everything that comes with that story and the things within it. There's the audience, and you will only ever have a certain amount of influence over what the audience experience through the story. And then there's the teller, and the teller will put their own particular flavour or particular approach to a story in the way that they tell it. Now, of those 3, that story is by far the most important thing in the room. If the teller thinks it's about the teller, they've lost it. It's not about them at all. They're just carrying the story. And if you think too much about the audience and what they want, you will end up changing things in a way which might dishonour the story, push it too far. So that little thing of the triangle with the story being the most important, I think it's a really good one to remember. Yeah, that's a good tip too, definitely. So I was going to ask you, how can storytelling help us connect to nature? That's something you and I are both in the business of finding out, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I am very, very keen on exploring with story, because I work in nature conservation. I work in a business which is trying to not only restore the depleted wildlife that we've got, I've still got, and try to provide more space for it and get more wildlife back very physically. But we are also in the business of really trying to help people reconnect with the nature around them.
Yeah.
It sometimes blows my mind that we are, as a species, entirely dominant in this place, and yet there are all these other non-human species around that often we just take for granted. They're backdrop in our lives, and we go through our lives not connecting, even though we are using resources from those other species in everything that we're doing. So story, I think, is a very powerful way of exploring our connection with nature because it is so emotional. There are huge amounts of facts out there about nature. You know, that sycamore tree behind you, I could tell you all kinds of things about the species it supports and the niche it occupies in the ecology of the place. But story really helps people connect at a different level.
Yeah.
You know, when you tell a story, when you work on a story, there's all kinds of stuff going on there that you can't rationalise and maybe don't even want to.
Yeah.
But you remember and you connect. And sometimes I think that the world today is so factual that we deny that part of ourselves, which feels things, which anthropomorphizes, which, you know, really does make these different connections with nature in our own lives. That whole web that we weave through our lives is really, really important. And story can help us honour that, and it can help us develop that as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Got shivers. And the wind is warm, so it's not. It's
not too bad for a September day. It's not too bad, is it? Yeah.
So what's alive in your storytelling practice at the moment? What's sort of bubbling up?
Gosh, at the moment, well, Botanical Tales. In working on these stories, a bit of a plug, but it's there's some stories in there are still working their way through me at the moment, and I'm working on them. So I've developed a new storytelling piece called Tangle of the Commons. It's got a kind of family version for outdoors, and it's also got a kind of longer performance version. And it takes some of these stories, and I've tried to weave a thread through the history of how we have treated the land, how we've lived with the land, and who owns the land, which is one of the big fundamental questions at the bottom of our whole culture, really.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've tried to take some of those stories and put them in that context as a storytelling piece to kind of provoke and prod a little bit. And quite a lot of the stories in that book are about the world of fairy, are about the other people, you know, them.
Yeah.
You've come across them before.
Yes. It's a big part of our cultural history in this land.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's also very interesting how often they pop up almost as guardians of the land.
Yeah.
And they dole out justice to people, good or bad, depending on what's going on. So there's a lot of that going on in this storytelling piece at the moment, and there's various outings for that piece this autumn, which is really exciting. So
Anything
that's one thing that's going on.
Anything you want to tell the audience about, in particular this autumn and in the future? What's coming up for you?
I'm doing 3 different shows with Beeford Arts later in September, which are going to be up in North Devon, which is really exciting. And then the first outing of the performance piece will be in Totnes on the 30th of November.
Yeah.
So that's great. I'm really pleased with that. And those stories have been working on me for years, so we'll have to see how that comes out in the telling.
Yeah, hopefully they'll work on people for years as well, once you've told them.
Hopefully.
Excellent.
And I'm just, I'm carrying on doing a lot of work with schools, which I really enjoy.
Yeah.
So working usually with Key Stage 2 for me, and working with children on particular story that might connect with the topics they're working on, or might connect with aspects of nature outside, around in their environment, and really getting them to explore that and getting them to become more confident in telling stories from here, in not just relying on the written page.
Yeah.
Which again I hugely enjoy. So there's a lot of that coming up as well at the moment. And then there might be more book things on the go, but we'll see about that.
A little might be, but yes. Well, I think that's it for today, and I'm just very grateful to spend some time with you and here in this wonderful place too. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Well, I've got a website which has got a lot of the information about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that is called Tales from the Wild.
Mm-hmm.
So that's easily searchable. And there's contact details there. Anyone who's interested, you're very welcome to drop me a line or give me a call and find out more about the work. And the History Press, obviously, with the Botanical Folk Tales book. There's lots of connections there as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, do get in touch.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Good to talk to you.
And you too.
Take care.